virtually every night. You know, capture, kill. Here's your target set. Here's a target. You're going to go in. You're going to lock it down. Take this building down. Capture or kill. And amazing. I stepped in and they said, okay, hey, Red, we're going to let you're going to run either as a mobility force commander, so meaning I'm in charge of all the mobility vehicles, so our external security, all these things when we're running mobility ops, or you'll be running as an assault force commander, meaning you'll be in charge of an actual target takedown. So these are the two jobs you're going to be doing.
But these are working simultaneously? Like are the vehicles...
Correct.
The mobility, is that a blocking force, squirter control, all that kind of shit?
Correct.
Do you want to explain what that means?
So if we were doing a mobility operation, meaning we were coming into a target by vehicles, the mobility force commander's job, along with our point men, reconnaissance guys, along with our EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, our guys that defuse bombs, we looked at our routes and we looked at, okay, what's going to be the best way to get there? What's going to be the lowest IED threat? How do we get in? What's going to be our egress? All these different things we looked at. Once we got to the target, we then looked at how do we lock this thing down? How do we create a perimeter around this target so that now the assault force will leave their vehicles and go in and take down that target. And we were that blocking force to prevent external people from coming in to take down the target. So myself and another one of the junior officers rotated back and forth. So on one mission, he would be the mobility force commander and I would be an assault force commander, and then we would flip-flop. And we basically, the way we ran it throughout the entire deployment is, you know, our platoon would run assault one week, the other platoon would run mobility, and we'd flip-flop. Now, if it was a helicopter insertion, then everybody was on the assault. And it would play out a little different in how we would do that. So I stepped in and, you know, typically the way we do things is you'll run alongside a guy that's doing that job. So you don't just jump in and do that job. You get it, you know, overseas in the combat zone, in this case, Iraq, and you'll run with that individual. So, and this guy was we got assigned a third officer in our platoon. So I was running with him. He was doing a great job and he was showing me the ropes. So I stepped in the first night to do my turn to be the mobility force commander, and I learned a valuable lesson, and I screwed up a little, but it shook my confidence a little, but I recovered very quickly. So we were doing a takedown in the western part of Fallujah called Jolan, which was a really dangerous area. It was a real Al-Qaeda hotbed area. Some of the most fierce fighting in the battles of 2004 kind of occurred in that area. And we had a target there. And so we had our mobility plan and we were driving in. And I'll just say that I won't get into the details because I don't want to talk about equipment. But the bottom line, our navigation system kind of fritzed out. For a specific reason, but I'll leave that alone. So it put me a little bit behind because there was a delay in the system because it wasn't working. So it put me behind on my turns. So lesson learned for me from that point forward, I always had multiple, not only did I have the computer, I had turn by turn, I had massive amounts of imagery with me so that I didn't care if I had a computer or not, I could navigate to the target. But it was my first op and we ended up taking a wrong turn. Took a wrong turn, which became another wrong turn, which ended us right in front of Blackwater Bridge, which was the bridge in Fallujah that in 2004, the Blackwater contractors were ambushed and hung on the bridge. Scott Helveston, former SEAL, was one of the guys there. And the road that led out to the front of Blackwater Bridge was like 4 or 5 story buildings on both sides, super channelized, really bad place to be. And yeah, so the guys are all chirping on the radio, get us the fuck out of here. Where, what is this? And it was a bad situation. We had to kind of navigate around and get back on course, but for a short period of time, we were it was an ambush haven. Anyone with an RPG could have just fired straight down into our vehicles. So yeah, I got a little bit of grief about that. Not good for the very first mission I ran.
Yeah.
Thankfully, so there was a lot of chirping because obviously there was still a little bit of resentment from some people, like, hey, Red's a problem. And so there was a little bit of chirping in the debrief, and I don't remember who it was, ROIC or somebody was like, hey, anybody could have made that mistake. He said, here's what happened. He said, I guarantee that won't happen again. And so he kind of stepped in, and I was like, roger that will definitely never happen again. So, lesson learned for me. But yeah, we were just running. Almost every night. Started to get into, skirmish gunfights. Nothing really big yet, but quite a few gunfights throughout that. And then right at the very beginning of the deployment on the turnover op, I was not there yet. I was still recovering, from my colitis. For the first time, the guys had gone into Karma, Iraq, which is northeast of Fallujah. And Al-Karma, first battle of Fallujah in 2004, second battle in 2006, a lot of Al-Qaeda and the insurgency got pushed out of Fallujah, and they were really heavy in the Karma area. And the Marines who were out there were like, dude, they were getting into gunfights all the time, and the ID threat out there was like off the chain. So we tried not to drive out there that often. The very first mission they did was a turnover op between 10 and 4, and that was the op that some people have seen out there that Mike Day got all shot up on. We lost Petty Officer Clark Swedler. He was with Team 4, but it was part of that turnover op. One of our guys got shot on that mission, and Mike obviously got all shot up. So that was going after the number one leader for Al-Qaeda in the Anbar province. And that was kind of the first time our guys had crossed paths with him. So he was somebody that we were kind of tracking our whole deployment, like, all right, when do we find this guy again? But we started going back into Karma. Probably the first month or so I was there, we just kind of stayed in and around Fallujah, but then we started branching out more and started doing targets there, and it seemed like almost every time we were going into Karma, like things were happening. On June 22nd, we went into Karma for a multi-target takedown. It's kind of a compound with 3 groups of buildings, and we had broken it up into 3 target sets. So you had Assault Team 1, 2, and 3. And I was in charge of Assault Team 2, and DJ talked about this gunfight when he was here. There was a lot of activity. We were patrolling up. It was late at night. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and we're just being told there's all kinds of activity on this target, and that's unusual. You usually don't see that. Most of the time, people are sleeping, unless they're bad. So we're listening, and we're moving up closer. We got to our final set point, which is about 60, 70 yards. There's a house, and then there's kind of this little structure before the main house we're taking down. So as we're patrolling by this last house, we noticed that there are several sleepers outside. So I said to either our team leader or whoever it was, I said, hey, kick a couple guys off. Let's wrap these sleepers up, so we know that they're not going to be a problem. So he grabbed a couple of the Iraqis, said, hey, wrap these guys up. And we moved up to the final set point, got to the set point, and coordinated, and we moved into to the door. As we're getting ready to go in, our guys, DJ being one of them, says, open, open, open. So front door was open. So they start going in, but as we're going in, we notice off to the left in the courtyard, there's like 11 women and children sleeping there. So right as the guys make entrance, we say, hey, kick some people, grab these women and children. And it was right about that time that a couple of grenades were dropped off the roof, and all of a sudden gunfire starts erupting from all around. So grenades go off, a couple of guys get fragged. Our interpreter really gets fragged. He takes the brunt of it up the side of his body, he takes a big piece in his neck. He's screaming on the porch. We're trying to shuffle all these women and children in who are now screaming and chaos. Push them into the house. I went in, started making entries. That was kind of the time that DJ and them went up on the roof. And as soon as they made entrance on the roof, 3 fighters, one directly engages DJ. They smoke check him, and they come back down the stairs, but they realized, hey, we got a machine gun on the roof, that machine gun was lighting off now on the 2 other buildings. We also started taking fire from another building about, 75 yards behind this house. So,
thank you. And please
for me, as the assault force commander, like chaos, screaming women and children. I got a guy that's bleeding out, guys that are all, SEALs that are hurt, but not bad, just minor frag. But still checking on them, making sure they're okay. DJ and them come down the stairs and are like, hey man, we got this embedded machine gunner, and we're taking fire from the back. So my first thought is, okay, we need to let's kill these guys behind us. So we had some helicopter gunships. So I said, okay, I need a full head count first. So it's kind of chaotic. Our medic, I said, hey, casualty collection point, let me know what you can do. And I started moving around the target to kind of make sure I got a count to see where everybody was. So some of our guys were still outside, pinned down, that were laying down fire. Came around the corner at the rear of the building, and 3 of our guys are so there's kind of the back porch is right here, and this is like a brick wall that you could stand behind. And the 3 of them are in a 1, 2, 3, just out in the open, like shoot out at the OK Corral. And I'm like, hey, dudes, get some cover. You ain't gonna stop bullets. And so they got back behind the wall. And at this point, dude, it keeps raining grenades. These dudes on the roof just keep dropping grenades down on us. So I finished coming around the building to try and get this full head count, and I'm down 1 every single time. And I'm like, dude, where is this other guy? So I'm like, this is a problem. I can't call in this fire mission until I figure out where this guy is. So talking to the ground force commander, I'm like, hey man, I'm navigating this out. He's like, hey man, we're ready. We'll release this fire mission. I'm like, I'm down a guy. You gotta wait. So suddenly it dawns on me how many guys stepped off for those sleepers at that other house 60 yards away. So, because I was counting them. I was counting 2. So I'm like, dude, I need somebody to go, check this. And then I'm like, well, who the fuck's gonna do that? We're in the middle of this gunfight. So finally I was like, I guess it'll be me. So came out the door, told my team leader, I'm like, hey man, I'll be right back. I'm going to this other house to get this head count. And we had 2 guys that were kind of out next to this little building, this concrete building that they were behind laying down fire. One of them, a machine gunner. And I said, hey, I'm going to that other house 60 yards away. I need you to lay down fire on that rooftop. And which they did. And dude, I don't know what it was. I felt like my gear weighed 500 pounds. I feel like that's the longest run I've ever done in my life. I don't know if because there was all this gunfire, but I was just I felt like I was running in slow motion. And I was expecting to get shot at any minute. But I finally got to the other house. Sure as shit, 3 guys and not 2. Had my full head count, ran back, and we released the first fire mission on the house behind us. I get back, still chaotic. Our medic's trying to, and he's like, hey dude, our turp's gonna bleed out if we can't get him out of here soon. So guys on the rooftop still dropping grenades and firing in all directions. So I'm like, hey, we got to take these guys out on the roof. And Mark Weiss, who no longer is with us, Mark ended up crazy, drowning in a diving mission, or in a diving, he was on vacation and drowned diving on leave several years later, but good fucking dude. So Mark was one of the more experienced guys at the target. I come back in, I was like, Mark, we gotta take these dudes out on the roof. And he's like, yeah, I agree. I was like, we need to send guys up there and take them out. And DJ talked about, we sent this, when we started to try and take the roof the second time, we grabbed, I don't know, this 15, 16-year-old kid, and we were like, do you know who's on the roof? And he was like, yeah, you know, it's so-and-so. And we're like, you need to go up there and tell them that if they don't stop firing, you know, we're gonna come up there and kill them. And he was like, okay. And we're like, all right, go up there. So you know how in a lot of the Iraqi house, you have the stairwell that comes up, there's kind of a landing, and then it comes back up onto the roof.
Yep.
So we were standing down at the bottom of the stairwell. He went up to the landing, and literally I'm standing from here, I mean, maybe a little further than where you are. And he went up to that landing and took 2 steps up, and man, they unloaded on him with that machine gun and literally cut that kid in half. So he drops. We back up at this point, and I'm like, Mark, we gotta take these guys out. And he was like, no, man, that's a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. So I thought, and then I said, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I said, we are going to get everybody out of this house, and we are going to fall back to the house that's 60 yards away, because we already got our Iraqis over there holding it. And I said, and then we're gonna crush, you know, we're gonna drop this house with a fire mission. So, but we had all these women and children, and like, you know, we couldn't leave them on the target. So I said, here's what's gonna happen. Everybody's gonna grab a woman and child. You guys that are out there, when I tell you, you're gonna lay down, you're just gonna fucking rain hell on that rooftop. And so all of us grabbed these women and children, and we started basically, you know, bounding back, laying down fire, just crushing this rooftop. So got back to that other house and got inside and got up on the roof, and, you know, at that point called in the gunship that just hammered this rooftop. And we got a whole bunch of secondary explosions. So we had been told these guys, so I don't know if that was, we were joking, did they have a giant duffel bag full of grenades? Because yeah, they dropped a lot of grenades on us.
Damn.
So we don't know if it was a bag of grenades or if it was suicide vests. We had been told that these guys had suicide vests. So, but we had kind of a big secondary explosion, and that took that target out. So everything went calm, but that night was probably the most chaotic night we'd had on that deployment. So we extracted, went to, I flew myself and the OIC, and I think our chief went to Fallujah Medical, took our 2 guys that had been fragged and our terp who they worked on, and we stayed there, and then, you know, before we came back. But that was kind of my, guys were like, dude, Red did a good job. And,
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah. And dude, that was, it was pretty awesome for me. Like, it was kind of the full circle to finally say, hey man, you got this. Like, you can do this.
How did it feel to you, not from the acceptance yet, but how did it feel to you to finally, I mean, it obviously had clicked and you had pulled yourself from the platoon as a leader, you know, and instead of, you know, you're leading men, you know, you're actually fucking leading men now. You're not trying to do their job because you want to get in the fight. You're leading fucking men. How did that feel? Did it click for you that you
It did,
had
100%.
developed into a leader at this point?
Yes, but I think the implications, I think before that had come into place. I think
Okay.
this was kind of the final like, hey man, this is how this works. And I think such a great point was, I think the old Jason Redman, young, immature Jason Redman, when he said, hey man, we got to take that stairwell. And, you know, the guy had said, no man, that's a suicide mission. Hey, fuck that, get up the stairwell. You know, but it was totally a good call. It was the right call. I mean, we would have got guys killed trying to send guys back up that stairwell. So, you know, kudos to Mark. He was 100% right. I mean, just trying to process all this information. I'm like, yes. So, and you know, it wasn't, you know, the thing I tell people, leadership is not like this perfect road. You're going to fuck up. I don't care who you are.
Well, that's a lot of shit going on. I mean, you got women and children. You got a SEAL been shot in the chest, DJ, you know, who's okay. You got fucking a missing head count. 2 people at another house. You got a fucking fire mission waiting on you. Yeah, and you got a Terp fucking bleeding out of his neck.
Yep.
I mean, that's a lot of shit to process, and an ongoing threat on the roof.
Yeah. But it was good, man. The guys did an amazing job. I mean, it just further showed me what an amazing group of guys we had to work with. Yeah. But that was kind of the most chaotic night we had, and the night that I kind of felt like the tipping point had occurred. So we saw a lot more. We had quite a few more engagements. We had a lot of close calls on that deployment. I don't know. We made entry into a house one night, outskirts of Fallujah, someplace, where we went in. We had made entry into the target, and we noticed that the carpet and everything had been pushed up against the walls, and houseborne IEDs were becoming a very big thing. So a houseborne improvised explosive devices where guys are rigging houses with explosives to blow up the house when friendly forces, you know, U.S., other allies, get into the house. So as we're going through, our EOD guy noticed it immediately and quickly looked over, and sure enough, there was a command wire that was running out the back of the house off into the field. So immediately yelled out our call for get the fuck out of the target, and I won't use the word, but that word got yelled, and man, it made your heart freeze. And dude, all of us, like, you know, 100-yard dash, man, as fast as you fucking could, because I mean, we didn't know if the house were going to blow up any second. Some of the guys from Dam Neck got caught in a houseborne IED a few years earlier, and it killed the EOD guy. And fuck some dudes up. So we got away from the house. I don't know if nobody was on the end of the command wire or the guy was asleep, but the house never blew, but we ended up calling in 2 500-pounders and huge. Actually, it was Kyle Milliken who called in that airstrike that night, and who's no longer with us. But big secondary explosions.
Damn.
So we had that. We took down some other really complicated targets that just very hairy, but guys had done well. We had a night, another real close call. So we were going to take down a target. It was a mobility op. So we were in our Humvees getting ready to leave base, and we were racking our weapons, getting everything ready, and the 50 cal, something broke on the 50 in the lead vehicle. And we were like, hey, you know, all right, well, we got to fix this. So they were like, yeah, we got repair stuff in one of the rear vehicles. We need to go get it. We need some time. Okay, roger that. So we pulled over on the side waiting for them to repair this. As we're waiting, a Marine Corps convoy drives up next to us, and the platoon commander talks to me and says, hey man, where are you guys going? We're like, hey, we're heading west. And I'm sorry, east. And he said, okay, roger that, so are we. I said, okay, just be advised, you know, we're going to be leaving. We're going to be coming up behind you guys, you know, at some point. He's like, okay, no problem. So they were brand new in country. Like they had only been there like a week or something. So they went out and turned down Michigan and started heading same path we were going to go. Get our gun back up, 10 minutes have gone by, and we leave. we're heading down the road, and we've been driving maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and big explosion down the road in front of us. So the Marines hit an IED. So if our gun had not gone down, that would have been us. And we came up behind them, and the kid in the rear vehicle, all amped up, fucking shot at us with a 50, which thank God he missed. He went wide, but he skipped rounds under our Humvee, my Humvee, the #1. So we had just had all these crazy close calls leading up to the end of the deployment. But for me, it was awesome. It was an amazing deployment. I had gotten everything back on track. I was up for orders in my next position, so I had a couple of choices. One of those choices was to screen and go over to Damneck, and I requested. I said, hey, I'd really like to do this. And I didn't know if they'd give me the thumbs up after screwing up, but I got a positive thumbs up across the board, so I was approved to come back and screen, which is, it's the first step, but even just to get the CO to say, hey, I'm gonna let you do this is a big deal. So I had that. I had a couple other leadership positions that were my secondary choices, and we were just kind of working on wrapping things up. We were waiting for our next level of missions. We had kind of shelved some of the missions so that we had turnover ops with the next team that was coming in, which I believe was 2. And my boss came up to me and said, hey, Red, this next mission you're going to run as the GFC, as Ground Force Commander. So I had been running as Assault Force Commander, Mobility Force Commander. Your next position, which is the senior position, leadership position on the ground, is Ground Force Commander. So, which is a big deal. I mean, they were grooming me for that next level leadership. So I was like, wow, man, this is awesome. I finally, I did it. You got your career back on track. You did the impossible. All my marks were really high. We were working on awards. We were working on flow to get guys back home. Everything was good. And literally, we were 1 week from sending the first wave of guys home. And I was on the last bird, which was fine because I had come late anyways. So we were just, everything was good. But we got word that the leader, the Al-Qaeda leader, who they had gotten in the big gunfight at the beginning, who had, killed Clark Swedler, was going to be in Karma. As a matter of fact, not far from where we had gotten into that big gunfight in June. It was only a couple 100 yards away, which wasn't far from where Mike Day got shot up also. So there was a lot of...
Interesting they would put the top guy in an area where you guys have been fucking up, you know what I mean? Not fucking up, but bringing it to him. It's just interesting that an area where there's so much SEAL activity, going after bad guys and killing them, that they would put the leader right in that same vicinity.
Well, I don't think he stayed there regularly. I think he came in for a meeting.
Okay.
Is what it was. So it was because it was a time-sensitive target. We got word that he was going to be there for a small period of time. So I did not think that mission was going to go. There was a lot of amplifying info that is classified that I'll leave. But I just didn't think that mission was going to go. So it was, I think we first heard about it around 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and right about the time we woke up and we're starting to gear up, because we slept during the day and then just went at night. So kind of heard the rumblings and the murmurings, and because of some of the things in the background, it had to go all the way up the chain of command, the Iraqi chain of command, the senior leadership chain of command, in order to get approved. I also thought maybe another unit may take that mission. So that's why I just thought this probably is not happening. So I went to the gym and was working out. When one of the guys came in, 8 o'clock or so, and he's like, hey man, this mission's a go. So went back, we started mission planning, and about midnight we launched, and it was a pure helicopter insertion and we were going to land right on the X, right on the target itself. So I was the assault force commander. So originally I was supposed to be the ground force commander, but my boss came to me and he's like, Red, like, I don't know. He's like, this could be a very hairy mission. Because we were told this guy ran with a pretty heavy security detail. We were told they wore suicide vests, that they had been trained to clack themselves off if we got too close to him. He was like, I know you're up for the GFC, but why don't you, he said, I'm going to take GFC. He said, you'll be the assault force commander for the target takedown. I said, okay, roger that, no issues. So we flew in and we ended up having 3 groups. We had the assault team, we had an external security team, and we had the headquarters team. And we had briefed that the assault team that we were going to come in and we were going to land directly across from the gate, and we had stacked our breachers and our initial entry team and our point men all on the left side door of the helicopter so that they could land. The pilots got turned around somehow, and we ended up coming in the opposite way. So instead of all our initial entry team, it's myself, my team leader, and our communicator sitting in the door on the opposite side of the helo. But you don't have time. It's not like, oh, rejock. It was like fucking go time. So already my team leader was, at about 4 feet, he was already out of the bird running. I jumped out after him, and we're running to the door. Look back, the guys are all behind us. He is number 1, I am number 2. So I start prepping a crash. Flash crash grenade is a grenade designed to stun, create a bright light and a loud bang to stun people inside of a room. So I had the crash in my hand. He gets up, tests the door, door's open. I crash it, and he and I go to make entry with the other guys behind us. And I'd probably done 100 combat entries at this point, but I think that's probably the first one where, like, literally my ass was puckered so tight it was probably up in my chest. I don't know, something in me was like, you're about to get shot the fuck up. And we entered and fully expected to be riddled as soon as we made that entry, and nothing happened. Entered into a very large room. We called a few more guys in. Ended up clearing the entire building, and no one was there. We could tell someone had been there recently. There was a lot of activity, cigarettes that still had a little burn, things like that let us know somebody had been there. But a lot of anti-coalition. How I got it or what it is, but I was fucked up. So they had to keep me in the hospital for a few days, put me on these heavy antibiotics. Well, I'll never forget, they came in the room and they were like, hey, so you're not going to be able to deploy, until we do a colonoscopy and make sure you're good to go. And I was like, oh no, that's not happening. I was like, I'm leaving.
You weren't excited?
I was not. As a matter of fact, I threw, it was the head resident that came in and told me this, and the poor guy, I basically threw him out of the room and said, go get me a real doctor, which now I understand the medical profession a lot better. No offense to anybody out there. You're a real doctor when you're a resident. And I was on the last bird, which is fine because I had come in the opposite way. So instead of all our, initial entry team, it's myself, my team leader, and our communicator sitting in the door on the opposite side of the helo. But, you don't, obviously this is probably the place where, he would be. Someone's here with him. So it's probably 2 a.m. in the morning at that point. Our EOD guys are grabbing all this. There was a car parked outside. We put all that stuff in the trunk, and we were gonna blow it in place, and that was gonna be it. We were gonna call it, it was gonna be a quiet night, So So I got our guys online. There were 9 of us, DJ being one of them, and we pushed up from the south going north towards his house. And there was, where our house was, there was a road and it kind of made a S. The target house was kind of here at the first bend, and underneath that curve was kind of this large vegetated field, and on the north side was nothing but thousands of yards of desert. So we're pushing through the vegetation. We pushed, we had a gunship overhead. As a matter of fact, things had gotten so hairy, we had been getting into so many engagements and had so many close calls, the gunship became a go, no-go criteria for us at the end of that deployment. Like if we didn't have a gunship, we weren't going. So we had the gunship overhead, and we're, you know, I was talking to them, hey, what do you see? We just see some guys that are laying there. So any movement, any guns? No, we're not seeing anything. Okay, roger that. So we pushed into this vegetation, and dude, it was so fucking vision didn't work at all. You couldn't see shit. You just had this green blob. And we're trying to crack through this stuff. So my spidey sense is like going bonkers. And this is, I tell a lot of people now, and I try and tell young leaders, man, listen to your sixth sense. I wrongly chalked it up as fear. I was like, it's just fear. This is a hairy situation. You know, this is just fear. This is how this is our tactics, you know, continue to push through, and, you know, everybody's online, we're good. You know, gunship doesn't see anything. But I didn't listen to that. I should have, hindsight being 2020, I would have grabbed my team leader and said, hey man, my spidey sense is going nuts. How's yours? What's going on? And maybe he would have said, hey bro, I think it's just fear, let's drive forward. Or he would have said, yeah dude, maybe we should approach this a different way. So we kind of kept pushing forward. As we're driving through, the gunship comes over and says, hey, you're gonna miss those guys. You need to turn to the northeast. I said, roger that. So we make this turn. On our left were 2 new guys and our EOD guy. So apparently those guys weren't monitoring the right freak. So they didn't hear the call to make that turn. So when we made that turn, they kept going straight. So as we're pushing, we realized, you know, it was the interpreter was off to my left, and he said, Red, hey, the guys aren't with us anymore. I'm like, what? So we stopped, took a knee, and we're waiting, can't really hear them. At this point, we had moved up to the northeast, and I don't know who was on the far right flank, but they were like, hey, I'm on the edge of a field. Why don't we push out? Let's get out of this vegetation, and then we can push up to the north. At that point, our EOD guy came up and said, hey, yeah, we missed you guys somehow. He said, I can push out to the west. I said, yeah, do that. Let's, you know, because now, you know, all I'm thinking about is we have 2 maneuvering elements and an unknown enemy force. So I'm like, roger that. We're pushing out to the east. You guys push out to the west. Let's move up in the open area. Let's reconnect, and then we'll go in and wrap these guys up from the north. So as we're pushing out that corner, I was now closer to the front, myself and the interpreter, DJ, our medic, one of the other guys, Matt, is behind me, and our team leader. And it was about that time. I'm now out in the open, myself and the interpreter, and push to the left to start moving down, you know, to the west to link up with those 3 guys. And right as our medic is coming out of the vegetation, he literally stepped right on an enemy fighter. This enemy fighter rolls over and goes to engage him, and he shoots him. So at this point now, I'm out front, the interpreter's out front. There's at least one other guy with us that's out front. And what we didn't realize is we were directly in the kill zone.
You fucking, who stepped on him?
Our medic stepped on an enemy fighter.
An enemy fighter?
Yep. So what we didn't
shit.
know, so what the gunship saw was only a few guys. What actually was there was almost what we estimate to be a 12 to 15 man element that had a ambush line set up about 5 yards back in that vegetation facing north. what we think probably happened was the leader had been in the building we took down earlier and then moved up to this house, 100 yards away to the north to sleep for the night. And probably had his security detail set up so that if vehicles came in, because our vehicles would have to pull right in front of that vegetation, or if helicopters landed in that open field, either way, they would have been in perfect position to engage us. We ended up coming up from the south. Very disciplined force because, man, we were cracking all kinds of brush behind them, and they didn't engage us from the south. They waited until we were in the kill zone. So, Luke engaged that guy, and that started that gunfight. The whole world erupted at that point. Luke was the first one shot, took a round right below the knee. He had a compound fracture. Bone came out and anchored him right into the ground. He's screaming, pinned down. That's when Maddie ran forward, grabbed him. The only thing behind us was this large John Deere tractor tire in that tree that I guess DJ got behind. I was out front. I'm laying down fire, and I'll be honest, what happened next was I started yelling out, ceasefire, ceasefire, because I knew the angle we were at. Like, we were in this corner, and those other guys were off to the west. So I'm thinking, dude, we're fucking totally gonna shoot each other. So I was initially yelling ceasefire, which I quickly realized, okay, we're in the middle of a gunfight, like we can't ceasefire. So then I started yelling, make sure you know who you're shooting at. But yeah, at this point we're getting all shot up. Matty had been stitched up the leg and in the arm. He still managed to get Luke back behind that tire. I guess by yelling and shooting, I attracted a lot of attention because at this point I had both machine guns turned on me, and I was stitched across the body armor, 2 rounds in the left elbow. I took rounds off my gun, rounds off my helmet, had my left night vision tube shot off.
Holy shit.
Turned to try and move back to the tire at this point. And I guess that's when I caught the round from behind that hit me in the face. So it caught me right in front of the ear, traveled through my face, took off most of my nose, vaporized my orbital floor, broke all the bones above my eye, shattered the head of my jaw, broke the head of my jaw and shattered my jaw down to my chin, and knocked me out. And Jay and those guys saw that. They saw me fall. So they thought I was dead. So I'm unconscious at this point, not aware of that. And this gunfight's now raging. Like, they're behind the tire in the tree, and they're just, raging gunfight about, I don't know, 15, 20 yards, 15 yards. I mean, it's pretty close.
Apart?
Apart. Yeah, from where the tire and the tree was to this vegetation where these guys are, but we can't see them. All you can see is muzzle flashes. So I come to at whatever point. The gunfight we know lasted 30 to 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes. I don't know how long I was unconscious, maybe 10 minutes. So I come to at this point, and I knew I was way fucked up. Like, when I got shot in the arm, like that fucking hurt a lot. As a matter of fact, I thought my arm was shot off. After I'd been shot in the face, when I came to, I really wasn't feeling any pain. I just was fucked up. I was trying to, like, okay, where am I? What's happening? And then kind of the world started to open back up, and like I could hear the gunfire. I also started to notice rounds traveling over me, the tracer fire literally traveling over me. At this point I was laying flat on my back, and I'm like, okay, holy shit, like, you're still in this gunfight, and that's tracer fire, like, do not sit up. At one point, and I don't know why, I took my helmet off. I'm laying there and I unclipped my helmet and took my helmet off, and that's when at some point I heard it I took that round through my helmet that now is drawn in my skull, so right through the forehead of my helmet. I took another round while I was laying on the ground off my right side plate. And the interesting thing about side plates is I normally didn't wear them. The only reason I wore side plates at night, one, a little voice before that mission was like, wear your side plates. I was like, I don't normally wear my side plates. I want to be lighter. I normally only wore them on mobility ops to give me more protection against IEDs. But I don't know, little voice was like, wear your side plates. So I wore my side plates and I took a round right off the right side plate. So shit show, chaos, shooting, and I remember there was a lull in fire and I called out to my team leader and was like, how long till the medevac? And he was like, Red, you're still alive? I was like, yeah, how long to the medevac? And he was like, 5 minutes. So I like focused on, you got to stay awake to stay alive. Yeah, you got to make it to the medevac, like if you're going to get out of here alive. So I tried to I knew my arm had been fucked up. I tried to get my tourniquet on my arm. And I'll be honest, I'd lost so much blood, I couldn't even break the rubber bands on my tourniquet.
Oh my God.
So, which is a lesson learned. I used 3 of those really thick rigging rubber bands we use for our parachutes.
That's what I used to use.
Yeah, well, lesson learned. When you're really weak, I couldn't break them. I couldn't get enough leverage with my good arm to break them. So I'm laying there, I'm bleeding out. This gunfight continues to rage, and more time goes by. And I ask our team leader again, hey, how long to the medevac? He's like, 5 more minutes. I'm like, you said that last time. So,
were you by yourself over there?
Yeah, I'm out front. I'm literally pinned down about 10 yards, 15 yards in front of the guys. So, and what I realized though is, dude, there's nothing they can do. They've got to win this fight. They can't run out and get you. They're going to get all shot up. So you just got to be patient, which is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
When you realize you're bleeding out.
Fuck, man.
So at what point Jay, calls me or yells out, hey, let me back up for a second. He asked for a fire mission, and the gunship is like, absolutely not. He's like, you guys are so close, we'll fucking kill you. Like, we were well within danger close parameters. So they're like, you have to figure out a way to fall back from these guys. And Jay's like, dude, there's no place for us to go. It's like thousands of yards of empty desert. It's like, not only that, I got 2 dudes all shot up, one, super shot up, and, we can't even get to him. And they're like, you got to figure something out because we can't bring this fire mission in. We'll kill you guys. So period of time goes by. He calls back again. They're like, no, absolutely not. So the 3rd time he calls back and he's like, look, and I don't know how long this had been probably 25 minutes at this point in a very intense gunfight. He's like, we are running out of ammo. He's like, nobody's going to be left if you don't bring this fire mission in. So finally they said, okay, well, what's your JTAC number? So JTACs in the military are guys who've been officially trained it's called a Joint Tactical Air Controller. So that means they have been blessed by special operations to have the skills to bring in gunfire from aircraft. And they have to know all the different parameters and all these things so that we don't mistakenly kill friendly forces, which we have done with fire missions from the sky. So they say to Jay, what's your JTAC number? Because they wanted to put the onus on him, that if they accidentally killed us, it would be Jay's fault and not the gunship's fault. And I respect that sometimes. Anyways, so he gave it to him, and I remember him yelling out to me, hey, incoming. And I remember laying there, and you can hear the gun go off, and there's a delay. There's a period of time before the rounds hit the ground, a decent amount. And I remember waiting, and all of a sudden, it was 40 Lightfoot, and it literally hit the ground directly in front of me. front of me enough that it blew up, and I felt the concussive blast and the dust and debris. And immediately, the machine gun in front of me went cold. And I heard the guy yelling out, Al-Agwa! And I was like, roger that, stand by, bro, because here he comes. And sure enough, they called in the next couple of fire missions. So in between those fire missions, Jay ran forward and got me and dragged me back to the tire. So they were still engaging and fighting. So some of the things I don't remember to this day, I found this out years later. We were all hanging out one night, and our medic was like, hey man, do you remember when you yelled at me for throwing that grenade? I was like, what? No. And he's like, yeah, like we're in, we were back, you were by the tire, you were totally fucking unconscious. And I said, hey, I'm gonna throw a grenade. And dude, you sat straight up and were like, put that fucking grenade away before you kill us all. And the reason being is because I guess it's a training lesson from SEAL Team 4 back in the day. You don't throw grenades into vegetation because it'll bounce off vegetation and come back at you. I don't know, but he was like, yeah, man, like, dude, I didn't, he was like, dude, you like barked thunder and then you laid back down and went back unconscious. So
I don't know.
I don't remember that story at all. I mean, I don't remember anything about that. Finally called in additional fire missions, took the enemy out, and they called in the medevac, and the medevac landed about 75 yards from us. And my team leader started to drag me. And it was at that point I suddenly felt all the pain. I was like, holy shit, this hurts. So I stopped him and I said, no, hey, stop, let me get up. And I still believed my arm had been shot off and I had taken my helmet off. So I was like, Jay, grab my arm and grab my helmet and I'm going to the helicopter. And so I walked to the helicopter, and I remember like I was walking like this, and literally blood's just pouring out of my face all over my buddy arm. I mean, I still in my mind can see it, like just blood pouring out of my face as I walked to the helicopter. And I remember getting to the helo and grabbing onto, that metal handle on the 60 door. I remember like just vividly grabbing that handle, and the flight medics, it was a 160th bird, the flight medics like helping me to get up into the helicopter. And then they loaded Matt and Maddie and our medic onto the helicopter. And so there are parts of this story I learned later. And then there are parts of this story that what I remember, it was just being in the helicopter, like stay awake, stay alive. There was a miracle moment that I tell people that occurred, and you and I last night, we were talking a little bit about faith and struggles in faith, and I have always struggled at times with my faith, and I'd love to tell everybody at this moment on the battlefield, like rock solid faith forever, but I still struggle sometimes. But right before that second fire mission, I was dying, like no doubt in my mind. Like I was laying there, this gunfight's going on, like, we learn all the aspects of trauma. You learn, hey man, this is what happens when you go into shock, and all the signs were there. Like, I was losing feeling, I was getting cold. It was getting harder and harder to breathe. It was getting harder and harder to think. And I was like, dude, you're getting ready to check out. Like, this is it. This is where you go. And that was hard. I'll be honest. At first, I was kind of angry. Like, I was angry that I had allowed us to get into this position. I also was angry that the enemy would have the victory of killing me. And then I started thinking more about my family, and that I was never going to see my kids again. And I talked to a lot of people about this, that, hey man, we worry so much about stuff in this life, and I got to tell you, when I was laying there dying, I didn't think about any of my stuff. I didn't care about that. All I cared about was, you know, my wife and my kids, and just saying, hey, I love you one more time. So it was in that moment that I don't know, I called out to God. I said, I need your help. I need strength to go home. And like that, like I had it. I just suddenly felt this surge of strength. So pretty amazing to go from I couldn't move a muscle however many minutes before that I got up and I walked to that helicopter and got on. On that ride back, all I focused on, stay awake, stay alive, stay awake, stay alive.
How the fuck were you breathing?
I was leaning forward. They had me set up, they had me in the helicopter, they had me up against the wall, and I was leaning forward like this. And I learned later, so so it was a TF-160th medevac crew. So years later, I tracked down that crew because I wanted to thank them. I also managed to track down a lot of people that were in the OR that saved my life. But a friend of mine who actually lives in this area now, retired 160th pilot, helped me track down and found the crew that flew that mission that night. I didn't get to meet the pilot, but I talked to him on the phone. And he was like, you know, man, I've flown like 200 medevacs. He's like, never once have I had somebody track me down and say thank you. I was like, well, I am. I said, I'm thanking you, man.
Damn.
Me and my family. So, so then later I actually got to meet the crew chiefs and the flight medic. So, and we were hanging out and they were telling me things about that night. Like they told me that they were not rigged for 3 wounded. They were only rigged for 2. So they weren't able to shut the doors or the door. So, and dude, they flew the rotors off that helicopter. And we're all, I mean, I've been shot multiple times. Maddie's been shot multiple times. You know, Luke almost had his leg severed. So we're bleeding everywhere. And he told me by the time they landed, they got us off the helicopter. They didn't know if we survived. He said that they had me, the flight medic had me in the helicopter. I was leaning, I was next to the crew chief door gunner. And what they did is they had me put my thumb on my chest. I don't remember this at all. But if I slumped, the medic said, hey, hit him, wake him up. And I'd come to and put my thumb back on my chest. So that's how, you know, part of the way that he was keeping an eye on me, and he'd come over and try and keep my airway clear while he was working on the other guys.
Could you see?
I could see. Even though I could see out of this eye. I don't, yeah, I mean, this was all fucked up, but they said when they landed, they got us out of the helicopter. I remember I was too weak. I didn't climb out of the helicopter on my own. They offloaded me and put me on a stretcher car. And I remember, but it's weird what your mind remembers. Like I remember driving, and I remember we went under like this wooden bridge, and there was a guy up on top smoking, looking down at me. I remember that. I remember getting into the outer area where they take all your gear off, and I remember them tugging on all that gear and like starting to cut everything off, body armor and weapons and all that stuff. So they got me into the operating room, and I was like, all right, dude, you made it. Like, you can die, and they'll save you. I remember watching like Baghdad ER, I think was the show, and there was a statistic on that show that if you made it, if you showed up at the combat support hospital, the emergency room there with a pulse, like the doctors had a 90% chance of saving you. So I was like, I'm good, man. Like I can let go, and you know they'll jumpstart me or do whatever they got to do. But like, I'm good, man. 90%, I'll take those odds all day. And so I let go because man, everything in me to stay awake, like everything in me wanted to let go. It was like swimming with 100-pound weights tied to my ankles. Like everything said, just let go, just go to sleep. And like I knew, like if you go to sleep, dude, you'll never wake up again.
Yeah.
So, you know, we were talking about that last night. I fought like hell to stay alive. So they get me into the operating room, and all these doctors and nurses come in, and they're barking out orders, and I'm like drifting into nothingness. And there was a nurse on my left side. So on my first line gear, I used to carry a grenade in a pouch right here. And I guess they missed that grenade when they were cutting all my gear off. So this nurse finds it and she yells out, "Hey, he's still got a bomb on him." And like instantly, like everybody runs out of the operating room.
Oh,
like I guess that was their, their emergency action plan, like clear the operating room. So I'm laying there and I'm like, oh my God, you've got to be shitting me. I'm like, I'm dying here. And that's like, I remember thinking like, oh my God, what a bad day. And then that's like the last thing I remember. So obviously they came back in and somebody got that grenade. And I've actually met that nurse and connected with her. And she remembered that night. But yeah, that started a whole new road.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Whole new road. So when I came to, I remember waking up and my commanding officer and CMC were there, and we were in Baghdad, which that was where our headquarters element was. So I remember, and first thing I did is I tried to say something, and I couldn't. That's nothing, air. And the nurse was like, Lieutenant, you've been shot in the face. She's like, you're traded. You're not going to be able to talk. So I was like, okay, give me something to write with. And I don't know, my first thought was I was just ecstatic to still be alive, I'll be honest. I also remember looking down and being like, holy shit, I still have my arm. Because I thought my arm had been shot off. So I asked for a pen and paper, and I wrote down 3 things to them. I said, are the guys okay? And they said, yeah. Maddie and Luke are out of surgery. They're good. They're fine. It's okay. I said, has my wife been notified? And the CO said, yes. How she got notified is kind of an interesting story, but he's like, yes, I talked to her. And I don't know why I wrote this, but I said, okay, do I still look pretty? And they were like, no, this will probably be an improvement. So,
how did your wife get notified?
So my wife is a trooper. And that's one of the great things about the Trident is I get to tell our whole story from the very beginning, from the day we met to, throughout my career. And, a lot of special operations spouses don't get a lot of credit. And it's a huge, it takes a unique breed of woman to be married to soft guys. We're a tough group of people to
We're a
love
pain in the
sometimes.
ass.
Yeah, we're a pain in the ass. And she was a rock star all through our relationship. So my wife had left her phone that morning and had taken the kids to go someplace and got home around noon and noticed that on the answer machine was U.S. government, U.S. government, U.S. government, U.S. government, all these, like 25 missed calls. And she's like, that's weird. But, technology was a little better. I mean, if we weren't running missions, I would call her and it would be a U.S. government number. So she's like, oh, that's weird that Jay tried to call me so many times. But we were a week from coming home. So she's like, maybe you want to, coordinate our vacation or something like that. So she didn't think anything of it. So then the phone rings again. She answers it and it's my, commanding officer, Gus. And he says, Erica, it's Gus. And immediately the call drops. And like at this point, like her heart sank in her chest. And she's like, oh my God, like 25 missed calls. Why is the CO calling you? And she's like in panic. Because she's like, well, if he was dead, they'd be at the door. But what if they came here this morning and I wasn't here and I forgot my phone? What if they've already shown up? So she's like panicking. So he dials back in, takes about 10 minutes to get through again. Erica, it's Gus. drops again, second time.
Oh my God.
So now she's like beside herself. So she tries to step outside so she's not freaking out in front of the kids. And finally on the third call, he gets through. And I was still in surgery, so he said, Erica, she said, your husband's the luckiest guy I know. He said, he's been all shot up. He's been shot in the arm. And he said he's been shot in the face. And he said, we don't know. He's not out of surgery yet. So she didn't know what my mental faculties were.
Yeah.
So she's trying to process this. She's got, my kids were young. My kids were 3 and 5, and she also had some of our neighbors or our teammates' kids over. She's got these kids running around. She told them they were going to take them to the park. So she's trying to deal with these screaming kids while she's processing all this information. And so she immediately starts coordinating and like, hey, what's next? And basically started planning for people to come over, her family to come in, take care of the kids so that she could head up to Bethesda to be there when I arrived. I mean, they said, hey, Jay will be here. And believe it or not, from the day I was shot to the day I was in Bethesda was only 4 days.
Wow.
So when I got to Germany, they did some more stabilizing surgeries. And it was at that point that one of the guys that flew home with me, I said, hey man, can we call my wife? And he was like, yeah. And I said, okay, well, obviously I can't talk, so you're gonna have to talk for me. He's like, okay. So I got Erica on the phone, and I think one of the first things I told her was, hey babe, I got all shot up, but my wang's okay. Because that was like our running joke. Like that's the worst thing. Like, what if you get your dick blown off? And but for her, she was like, it was like the greatest thing I could hear, because she was like, and he was like so funny, because when I wrote it, he was like, I'm not reading that. I was like, come on man, you got to read it. And she was like, it's what I needed to hear, because she's like, I knew your sense of humor was still there.
Yeah.
So
Let's take a break. Hey guys, let me tell you about this subscription service that I've been working real hard on, called Vigilance Elite Patreon. Basically on Patreon, we have it broken up into 3 different tiers. We got tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Let's dive in. Our tier 1 patrons get all the behind the scenes footage of the Sean Ryan Show. That could include behind the scenes photos, that could be side conversations that we have in between breaks, that could be specific questions that our patrons give us for the guest on the Sean Ryan Show, and a ton of bonus content that doesn't really fit into any specific category. For our tier 2 patrons, they get access to our tactical training library, which consists of well over 100 videos. We've broken those videos up into separate categories, and those categories are rifle fundamentals, pistol fundamentals, drills, tactics, driving, gear and weapon setups, and everybody's favorite, mindset. Also on tier 2, you will get a live update from me on the 1st and the 15th of every month, where we talk about the upcoming guests on the Sean Ryan Show, plus all the benefits of tier 1. Our top tier, which is tier 3, gets full access to all the other tiers, plus they get full access to me, where we do video teleconferencing, VTC, once a month. We discuss anything from tactics to current events to who's coming on the show. I take suggestions, and it's very interactive. No matter what tier you choose, The support is greatly appreciated, and it is the only thing that makes this show drive on. So thank you for all the support. See you on Patreon. All right, we're back. This just gets heavier and heavier.
Well, it comes up. We're coming up.
So you're home now.
Not yet.
You're on your way home. You're writing on the board. Your buddies. You just told your wife that your wang is okay.
My wang is okay.
It's still intact.
So they flew us home on the medevac bird, and that was a miserable flight. I have so much respect for people out there that have been trached. You know, oftentimes people are like, "Oh, what was the worst part of your injuries?" Wearing a trach for 7 months and 2 days sucked. Trachs are nasty. You know, they because you have damage to your breathing structure in your face, they insert a plastic tube into a hole in your throat that basically goes down right above your trachea, hence a tracheotomy. What you don't know about it is your body sees it as a foreign object and oozes all this mucus to fight against it. So it gets totally nasty and it gets plugged up and you constantly have to clean it. And if you're not constantly cleaning it, you can suffocate or suck a big piece of mucus into your lungs. So on the flight home, I'm trying to deal with this trach, and the nurse is dealing. I mean, we had a lot of fucked up guys. So you had the ambulatory wounded guys who basically sat in the seats, and then you had those of us that were like in the ICU, who were like in beds with all the beeping everything. And the other problem I had was I was wired shut. So they had a pair of scissors because if I vomited with your wired shut, you also can aspirate. So nasty, messy situation. But she was trying to deal with everybody else, and I was really having problems breathing. So just a miserable flight home, and thankfully I kept feeling like I was gonna die on that flight home. But got home, and I remember landing. It was at night. And they unloaded us, and they put us on like these school buses. They were blue, and they had racks inside that they hooked your bed onto. And I remember them driving. I don't know where we would have flown into. I guess Dover would have made sense, close to Bethesda. But I remember driving, and man, all these people out here that bash the United States. Like the second, just to be on the road and to look at how clean our country is compared to third world countries you and I have been to. The infrastructure we've built, not to knock any other country that's out there, but like, I don't know, it made me feel good. Like just to be home, like I'm home. And so I remember driving to the hospital, but I had this growing fear. There was a fear growing inside me, probably the most I've ever been afraid in my life. And it was, I knew my wife was at the hospital. And I was really terrified how she was going to handle it. I had not seen myself in a mirror, I'll be honest. I was terrified to see what I was going to see. I knew that my nose was pretty much gone. They had these orange tubes sticking out of what was left of my nose. I'm wired shut. I had the trach. I had no use of my left arm, so I can't remember if they had put the external fixators in yet or not, but that's the metal hardware that sticks out of your body when they're replacing severely damaged bones. So I can't remember if I had that or not, but I'm a fucking mess. And in my mind, I felt like a monster. Like what's gonna happen when she walks in the room and sees me? Like, this is what you married, and now you're gonna have to live with this disfigured freak. So I was afraid. I was afraid of how she was going to react. I read a lot of stories about Vietnam, and I'd read about wives coming to the exact same hospital, Bethesda, walking into the room and seeing guys who had been blown up and burned and like taking off the ring and putting it on the end of the bed and walking out. And we had a strong relationship, but I don't know, man, that's a hell of a test.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it is.
I don't know if I was carrying the scars of, what had happened years before when I was told, hey, you don't measure up, we're gonna kick you out. I don't know what was going on in my mind, but I was fucking terrified. And they brought me into the hospital and they took me up in my room, and the nurse started, trying to clean me up a little bit. And I don't know, at some point I realized like I still had blood caked in my hair. And I was like, you gotta clean me up. Like it would have made a fucking difference. I'm hooked up to breathing devices and everything else. But I was like, you gotta like clean me up. And they're just like, well, I know, your wife's outside the room, are you ready for her to come in? And I was like, no. And like,
You're like, look, I'm a fucking Navy SEAL, and we all have perfect hair.
Yes. Yeah, this blood doesn't work like hair gel, all right? You gotta, I need some good shit. But I was like fucking terrified. And she's like, your wife's outside. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready yet. So I kind of kept stalling. And finally she's like, you need to let your wife in. And I was like, okay. So yeah, finally I was like, okay, I don't know how long that was, but my wife was like, she was beside herself. It felt like hours outside the room. So finally they let her in, man. And dude, my wife is such a saint because, man, she walked right into that room. Dude, she did not pause. She did not everything that I was expecting. Dude, she walked straight in, walked right up to me. She pushed the fucking tubes and shit out of the way, kissed me right on the lips and was like, we're gonna be okay. And dude, I needed that.
Yeah.
I needed that a lot. Yeah, because I literally, in my mind, I was like, dude, you're going to be disfigured forever. So anyways, man, my wife, she came into that place and she definitely earned her name, the long-haired admiral, after that. Because, dude, she took that place over. She was tracking everything. And because of all my injuries, I had an entire team of doctors. And there was a lot of amazing things that happened. One of probably the most amazing things that I get to give tribute to is my arm was destroyed. So I took a PKM round right here, which blew out the entire back of my humerus and shattered a huge shard took out a huge chunk of my humerus. And then I took a round on the inside, which blew everything out the back. So it effectively destroyed both bones, the heads of both bones, ulnar radius. The doctor said, you couldn't have done a better job destroying your elbow if you tried. It damaged my nerves to where I had no use of my left hand. And it was so bad that the orthopedic team was like, we should amputate his arm. There's nothing we can do, massive nerve damage, elbow totally destroyed. The head surgeon at Bethesda at the time, a guy by the name of Dan Valaic, was a former SEAL from SEAL Team 2. And he was the head of orthopedics. And even though his team was like, hey, we should take this guy's arm, Dan was like, no, I'm gonna work to save this guy's arm. And he came into the room and told me that. He's like, my team is saying that we can't save your arm. He said, I'm gonna save your arm. I don't think if it had been a team guy, I would have done that.
Yeah.
So another amazing God, fate moment. Hey man, there's a lot I can't do with this arm, but I have an arm. I can type, I mean, I can ride a motorcycle, you know, I can hug people.
Yeah.
So, so that occurred, and but just a really the start of a hard road, and I'll be honest. In the beginning, I really struggled. For the first week I was in the hospital, I'll be honest, I was angry.
What were you angry about?
I was angry because I had worked so hard to get my career back on track, and like that hit it, you know, come to an end, you know, and so I was angry about that, and I also was kind of kicking myself, like, you know, you made a bad call, like this is what put you in this situation. So I was kicking myself about that. I kept saying, man, if you had moved left, or if you had moved right, or if you had done this, or if you had done that. And finally, at one point, I was like, stop it. You can't change what's happened. What's happened has happened. All you can do is change what happens from this point forward. And I asked myself, I said, did you do everything according to how you'd been trained? And the answer was yes. You know, the SEAL teams have changed how we're doing things now because of that mission, but we did things according to our SOPs. There are definitely heavy lessons learned out of that operation, which gladly we've changed. But up to that point, we did things based off our SOPs. So I told myself, dude, you executed that mission how you were trained. Stop kicking yourself. And then I also found solace. I told myself, you know, you're the worst wounded. And I'll be honest, that gave me, like if Maddie or Luke had been the ones that were all shot up like I was, I mean, they were shot up, but like if they were, it would have bothered me. Like, or if we had lost someone. And I said, everybody came home, you're the most wounded, like, let's go. And I started thinking about all the leadership lessons that I had learned over those last 2 years. Hey, man, you got to grind forward. You know, lead yourself, lead others, lead always. Like, you can't sit here and feel sorry for yourself. Like, fuck does that accomplish you? So I'm kind of grinding through all those things in my mind. And it was around that time, like I said, about 7 days into the hospital, that I had some people come into the room, and they were like, they were having a conversation off to themselves, and I had been talking to them, and I guess started to drift off. So, but I was in that in-between phase of consciousness and totally asleep, where you can still hear things going on, but you're not really totally engaged. And they started having a conversation about the hospital and how hard the hospital was, and you know, what a shame, all these young men and women that are all blown up and battered, and they're never going to be the same, they're never going to be able to have a great life, you know, what a shame we send all these young people off to war and they come home broken. And I was hearing all that, and they left, and like it was stewing inside me, like, you know what, I'll be honest, I think it's what I needed. Because it was kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. And I'm not going to let anybody else come in here and feel sorry for me anymore. Like, guess what? Like, you need to get up and go. Like, maybe not getting out of this bed, but mentally, you need to get up and go. And when my wife came back in, I told her, I said, hey, nobody's allowed into my room ever again if they're going to come in here feeling sorry for me. Because I said, from this point forward, I will not feel sorry for myself. And that's when I wrote out that sign. And the sign said, attention, all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I'll make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically. I have the ability to recover. And I'm going to push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed at the management. So I don't know why. But signed at the management, and I said, hey, babe, put this on my door. and like nobody's allowed in this room until they read it. And originally it was on a 8.5, 11 piece of printer paper, because that's what I was writing on. I have an entire ream, like 500 sheets of conversations from the 8 weeks I was in the hospital and I couldn't talk. And it was originally on that. She put it on the door and I said, hey, a couple days later I had somebody else come in the room and they were definitely beside themselves, a lot of pity. And I said, okay, I need this sign. We need something bigger. And she went to the exchange and found a big, bright orange piece of poster paper. And we transcribed it word for word on that paper. And I said, put that on the door. No one's allowed in until they read that, and they need to understand it. So it kind of took on a life of its own. Probably the day, or maybe 2 days after it went up, a team guy came to visit. And as he was leaving, he read the sign. He took his trident off and tacked it into the bottom of the door. And I got to be honest, man, that was a huge thing for me too.
Yeah.
Because after I'd done this crazy journey of failure and redemption, and now I'm kind of faced with, is my career over? To have a fellow team guy say, this is what being a team guy's about. Tacked it in the door, and it took on a life of its own. A New York firefighter had come to the hospital, John Vigiano, who I later became really good friends with. John was a legend in the New York Fire Department. He was a Marine. He lost both sons on 9/11. One was a cop, one was a firefighter. And John started coming to the hospital after that to visit with wounded warriors, and came to my room and visited and saw the sign on the door, took a picture and wrote a blog about it, and it went viral. It went everywhere. National news was doing stories about it. Blogs started getting written about it. And we started to get a little too much attention. So, and my name wasn't out there yet. And I was like, no, I'm not doing interviews. Because in my mind, I'm coming back operational.
Yeah.
So, but the sign kind of took on a life of its own. So over the next 6 weeks, they continued to put me back together. I had a surgery probably every other day. I probably had 20 surgeries in the first 2 months I was there. And then I was released and they sent me home. And that started all the outpatient surgeries. So over the next 4 years, I had about 40 surgeries. What a lot of people don't realize is when you get wounded, it's not a clear path. Battlefield injuries are super dirty. So a lot of guys, I'm really fortunate that they didn't amputate my arm. There's a lot of guys that come back that have injuries and they may still have their limb, but infection sets in and they end up having to amputate to try and stop the infection. So, and I ended up getting infection in my face, which became a major issue. The nose that I have is the third nose they built me. The first two totally failed. And at one point when the second one failed, because of the amount of necrotic tissue and infection, they ended up cutting everything out. So I literally just had this hole in my face. I felt like Skeletor. I wore like this gauze patch over my face during that time. And dude, that was a hard road to ride. Our faces as humans are, it's what we look at, it's how we communicate. And so I attracted a lot of attention, which was tough. And some of my fuck it mindset worked and sometimes it didn't. Continuing to grind and drive forward as all of this got put back together. There was another fortunate thing that occurred. And that is at Bethesda, they were talking about how to put my face back together. And I want to give a shout out to all the amazing doctors and nurses in the military. Most of them are incredible. The oromaxillofacial team at Bethesda at that time, we did not get along very well. And I kept trying to bring together all the different teams of doctors, from ENT to eye to oral maxillofacial to plastics to orthopedics, to everybody that was working, because we had an Air Force Special Operations guy, medical guy, who was assigned over our case from SOCOM. And he basically said from the beginning, hey man, make sure everybody's on the same page. He's like, it's just like a mission. Everybody needs to be read in so they understand all the different parts. I was like, okay. So I kept trying to get the OMFS team in, and they were like, no, we don't need to do that. We're good. We know what our part is. And I'm like, hey man, like, I need you to be talking to plastics. I need you to be talking to everyone so that everybody knows how their part fits together. And they wouldn't do it. So finally it started getting a little hostile. I'm like, look, man, like, you guys want to do things, like, I don't trust you to do them. Like, you need to show me pictures of people you've put back together, because I'm beginning not to trust you. And so it kind of got more and more hostile. So finally I had caught wind. They had told me after they had put me back together, they were going to send me to Chicago to get my, send me to this doctor who was like one of the world's best on nasal reconstruction, a civilian doctor. And so one day in the hospital, I called him. I found his number and I called him and I said, hey, I'm a Navy SEAL. I got shot in the face. My nose got blown off. I've got some massive facial damage. This is what these oral maxillofacial doctors are telling me. What would you do? And he was like, why don't you come to Chicago and see me? So I called, the command, or I called Naval Special Warfare, and I said, hey, can I get permission and orders to go to Chicago to see this doctor? And they were like, yes. So I went and met him. And he was like, no, what they're talking about is old technology, medical technology. I want to connect you to my partner who I work with in Chicago, who I went and met with. And that guy said, you know what? He said, you're more complicated than most cases. He said, I want to send you to Baltimore. There's a doctor there who is probably one of the best in the world for facial reconstruction. So flew to Baltimore probably a month later, and met this guy, Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez. And as soon as I met him, dude, I walked into the room, like I showed you my no bad days. Well, the skull, so this was taken off the acrylic model of my skull, which I ended up carrying around everywhere I went to meet doctors as they figured out how to put me back together. And I remember walking into Dr. Rodriguez's office, and the entire office was lined with skulls that looked like mine. And right off the bat, he was like, hey man, like, I worked on a couple Delta guys, and he pulled up pictures and was showing me guys that had been shot in the face. And he's like, this is what I did for them. I was like, dude, I need you. So he ended up doing all my facial reconstruction. And then later I went back to the nose guy, Dr. Robert Walton, who did all my nasal reconstruction. But Ed Rodriguez is probably, so I'm really fortunate. I got out of the military medical system, and I've had a miraculous outcome. To take a high caliber machine gun round to the face, yeah, and look like this now is incredible. And Doc Rodriguez is probably, in my opinion, and I think most people would agree, probably the best facial reconstruction dude on the planet. I don't know if you remember, probably 10 years ago, the woman that got her face bit off by a baboon and they did the first facial transplant. Damn. So Dr. Rodriguez led that surgery. Wow. So just fortunate as things unfolded. I hung on to getting back operational, and I ended up finishing my time at SEAL Team 10. And when I was coming back, from being wounded, I was screening to try and go over to the development group. So I got permission, and they allowed me to go over there to be able to serve there. And I worked in I worked in ops. I worked some special projects and things like that. And my goal was hopefully to get back operational, though, so that I could finish my career over there. Unfortunately, that didn't really ever happen. So originally my arm was totally fused, so I couldn't bend it at all. I finally got, through a lot of rehab, I still have some nerve damage with my ulnar nerve, but I kept trying to find doctors who could give me more movement. Found a doctor at Johns Hopkins, Andy Egglestetter, who was one of the premier hand and arm guys out there. And he went in and rebuilt my elbow and got me so I can bend this much and I can extend this much. And he was like, that's the best you're ever going to have. Which, after I recovered, I quickly realized doesn't work. It's really hard to grab things on your side. I mean, it's even pretty difficult to clip my helmet or do things like that. So the command was great about helping me. The medical department there was incredible, and we kept searching across the country to try and find somebody better. And I would meet literally some of the best hand and arm guys anywhere, and orthopedic surgeons and high-level surgeons, they can be an arrogant bunch. And yeah, I'd meet them and they'd be like, oh yeah, I can definitely fix your arm. And I'd throw that x-ray up, dude, and it'd be like they had the wind taken out of their sails. It'd be like, oh. I'd be like, yeah, man, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for this. They're like, we don't even know how your elbow's functioning.
Wow.
So I called back Andy Egglestetter and I said, hey man, I need more movement. I need like at least 10 more degrees. And he was like, not only no, but hell no. He's like, going into your elbow was like going into hell. He's like, no. He's like, it's amazing the outcome you have. He's like, not only that, he said, if you allow somebody to go back in there, he's like, there's a high chance you'll have a negative outcome. He's like, you could be in chronic pain and your arm may not work right. He's like, so I sure as hell am not going back in there, and I'd recommend you not either. Or you not have anybody do it either. So once again, stubborn, didn't listen to that. Kept looking. I finally, probably the 10th doctor was a really esteemed guy out of Duke University. And this was probably 2 years after my injuries at this point. And I got myself back in some kind of shape. I was like, man, this is the last thing. If I can get my arm right, I can go back and be operational, hopefully qualify, go through green team. And he sat me down and he was like, listen, he's like, you have an amazing outcome. He's like, what you can do with this arm is incredible. He said, I don't think there's anyone on this planet that can do any better than what you have. And he said, that other guy that told you you're going to have a negative outcome, I agree. He said, if you were my son, I would not let you get this surgery. He said, and I highly advise you not to look anymore. So I remember walking out of that, and I had gone down there by myself. My wife had not gone on that trip. And I remember walking out of there, it was late in the afternoon, like the sun was setting. And I remember, I don't know, I think for a while, reality had started to set in. Like I kind of knew that that chapter was closing. So I kind of came to grips with it and was like, all right, man, this is it. That story's over. So came back and I asked the command, I said, hey, I want to, so I was at probably 17, 18 years at that point. And I said, I want to finish my career. I want to do 20 years. I came in to do 20 years. And they said, okay, roger that. So I stayed, like I said, I got to work ops, I got to work special projects, I got to work on some other unique things, which was cool for me to be able to play a part in that command, even though I wasn't operational. And then we started the process of medical retirement, about 19 years, which took 2 years to go through that whole process. So I retired 21 years, August 30th, 2013. And I probably would have kept going if I could have. Although what I started to realize was, so in the SEAL teams, we have no, like the Army has administrative leadership positions. In the SEAL teams, we don't. Like, you have to fill operational billets to make the next ranks. So I could have made lieutenant commander, but I never would have made commander because I would have had to fill an operational billet in order to make that next rank. So I don't know. And several things were starting to happen in the background. I'd launched our nonprofit, and I was working with Wounded Warriors on our nonprofit. That was starting to take more time. I had started to write, although I never intended to write the